right, a very good morning to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and passionate advocates for climate action. Welcome to day 9 of the Malaysian Support for the COP30 event, a 10-day virtual journey held in conjunction with the UN Climate Change Conference in Belém, Brazil. As this is the second last day of the conference, we are slowly coming to an end and we will also be exploring a variety of climate themes. We have been already exploring a variety of climate themes from the past couple of days, and we'll be still exploring some more themes for tomorrow also, and in the sense of highlighting how Malaysia is turning climate ambition into meaningful action. Additionally, you're also welcome to visit the website to check out the last theme for tomorrow. So today's theme, known as Paradigm of Progress, explores how advancing just transitions, green technology exchange, and cross-border collaboration can redefine sustainable development. It's also about fostering inclusive growth, where innovation, equity, and international cooperation drive a fair and forward-looking climate transition. We begin today's program with a conversation featuring Dr. Gary Theseira, Chair of the Council of CGM, who will deliver the opening keynote for the session. He will then be joined by Ms. Natalie Tan, ESG editor from The Edge, who will be discussing global reflection on technology, innovation, and just transitions, setting Malaysia's path and context with global progress. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Gary and Ms. Natalie as they will share their insights and reflections to open our day 9 conversation.
So a very good morning from Kuala Lumpur, a wet and rainy morning in which my presence here was almost delayed due to slippery roads and an accident that happened 100 or so meters in front of my vehicle. And fortunately, it was a very slight one, and no one was particularly badly hurt, and I was able to make it in. Now, as Aaron has already mentioned, here we are. It seems like yesterday we were getting ready to begin our parallel coverage of the COP and going through the thematic areas that were going to be featured at the Malaysia Pavilion. And here we are at the penultimate day of the COP. And of course, a great deal has been coming out of Belém, Brazil. The big news, of course, and that's been picked up and analyzed quite a bit, I might say, is the draft decision text involving the Brazilian presidency's global multi-route. And this is something that I will be discussing with our guest very shortly, Natalie from The Edge, who is a good friend of Climate Governance Malaysia, a good collaborator. It's one of those things that is sort of being featured as central by the presidency. Before we get into that, though, perhaps a little bit of what's going on the side. We do find that some of the primary civil society organizations are sort of ramping up their analysis of what's going on, and some of these things are actually being captured. The first thing I'd like to bring to your attention, though, is that there is a feature called the fossil of the day. And it's a quote unquote kind of dubious award that is given to parties, countries that are seen to either be the wrong side of climate change, blocking issues, making issues contentious, or otherwise seen to be interfering with the COP process. And I think a lot of people who've been involved in the COP know about the fossil of the day, and something that sometimes you look forward to a little bit as a little break or a respite from all the noise that's going on at the COP. But interestingly, civil society organization that gives out the Fossil of the Day award felt very, very compelled at the very start of the COP to do just the opposite. And they came out with a Ray of the Day award. Very interestingly, it's Ray of the Day award is kind of the mirror opposite of the Fossil of the Day award. And at the very beginning of this COP, this award was actually given to the Group of 77 and China, which is essentially the coalition, the largest coalition in the COP, representing 134 developing countries. And this Ray of the Day award was given to the G77 and China for their opening statement or intervention in the Just Transition Dialogue. The award was given because they called for the establishment of the Just Transition Mechanism under the UNFCCC. And this was perceived as a proposal that encompassed and mirrored many of the core elements that civil society and trade unions have been advancing through the Belém action mechanism, which is once again the big news, which we'll be talking about a little bit later as well. So in the G77 and China statement, they called for integrating fairness and equity into all levels of implementation. They talked about promoting coordination and knowledge sharing across sectors and institutions. They called for supporting non-debt creating finance for these transitions. They wanted to strengthen social dialogue and ensure that what remained at the heart of climate action was not profits, but people. So once again, the G77 and China kind of setting the tone very, very early and highlighting very, very specific principles, principles that have re-emerged time and time again as we've gone through this week and a half of the COP. And they apparently, of course, the Brazilian presidency, being Brazil, is one of the parties in the group of 77 in China, in the subgroup known as basic, the basic group or the BRICS group. But this close relationship is definitely demonstrated, but it would have been a difficult task to get all of this into the G77 and China statement simply because of the great diversity of the group of 77 in China. Don't forget, this group of 134 member countries encompasses diverse groups such as the like-minded developing countries, the Caribbean small island states, the Pacific small island states, the least developed countries, the Arab group, the Africa group, and other developing country coalitions like the Coalition for Rainforest Nations, etc., ILAC, the Latin American groups, and to have built this level of consensus ahead of the COP to have such a strong opening statement, I think does say a lot about it. Indeed, the award was also given because, in their view, the G77 and China demonstrated the spirit of leadership in what President Lula has called a COP of truth, clear-eyed about reality, rooted in cooperation, and unafraid to propose solutions that bring justice to the center of the process. Apparently, there were a number of other commentators that raised this G77 and China statement. Annabella Rosenberg, a senior advisor on the just transition at Climate Action Network International, said, quote, "The G77 and China have just thrown down the gauntlet. Their call for a just transition mechanism marks a turning point in the move from dialogue to delivery. After years of empty talk, developing countries are demanding what this process has so far failed to deliver: a real mechanism to make the just transition happen." Continue to quote, this is the majority of the world saying enough dialogue, it's time for delivery. The G77, their proposal echoes what civil society has called for in the Belém Action Mechanism to coordinate support, to close finance gaps, and to ensure workers and communities are at the heart of climate action. In her view, quote, the challenge is clear. Will rich countries now back words with justice and support, the very thing that could give this COP some credibility? So I believe this is indeed the only Ray of the Day award to be given throughout this COP. During other times, I think it's been mostly fossil of the day awards going to countries like the UK, Japan, the US in absentia, one to Indonesia, unfortunately New Zealand, Canada as well. So the G77 in China winning the only Ray of the Day award. Also like to mention some of the other groups that are involved. His Holiness the Pope did send a message to the bishops at the COP, so the Vatican also is one of the groups at the COP. The Pope, in sending a message to the cardinals at COP30, told them that telling the world with words and gestures that the Amazon region remains a living symbol of creation with an urgent need for care. Sent a very strong message to the bishops and the cardinals in Belém. In Pope Leo's words, you chose hope and action over despair, building a global community that works together. And while the Pope recognized that progress has been made, he emphasized that it is not enough and that hope and determination must be renewed not only in words and aspirations, but also in concrete actions. He pointed out, creation is crying out in floods, droughts, storms, and relentless heat. 1 in 3 people live in great vulnerability because of these climate changes. As stewards of God's creation, we are called to act swiftly with faith and prophecy to protect the gift He has entrusted to us. He made some comments on the Paris Agreement, calling it, quote, our strongest tool for protecting people and the planet. And he made this rather interesting but very, very clear point. For those, and I think it was intended for those who are actually critical of the Paris Agreement. He said, quote, it is not the agreement that is failing. We are failing in our response. Right. So in closing, I think he also left us with another very interesting quote. He said, quote, we are the guardians of creation, not rivals for its spoils. And so once again, the idea that it should be and needs to be an all of government, all of society approach, that all stakeholders have a role to play in this global transition away from fossil fuels and towards a low carbon society, a net zero society, to reverse this huge increase in greenhouse gas emissions, pushing up our global atmospheric greenhouse gas emissions and causing the level of destruction and loss of life and property and livelihoods, might I add, bringing misery to our human civilization. And not just our human civilization oftentimes, but also the ecosystems in which we live and that help us to continue our presence on this planet. Right. We will continue to monitor this space, but as I said, the big news coming out has actually been surrounding the discussion paper that was, or rather the Belém Action Mechanism draft decision that was released by the COP presidency, and it has everyone kind of looking at it, analyzing it, breaking it down, and in our next segment, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the Belém Action Mechanism for Global Just Transition. And to help me do that, I'm very pleased to welcome to the program Natalie Tan, Zhai. Natalie is the ESG and I believe sustainability editor at the Edge Malaysia. Natalie, a very, very warm welcome to our coverage of the 30th COP in Belém, Brazil. How are you this morning?
Hi, Dr. Gary. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm good. I'm glad I didn't have to go on the road like you this morning.
Okay. Well, okay. So yeah, the weather for the past few days has been wet. But that's not abnormal for Malaysia. There was a fairly severe storm 2 days ago, but once again, it didn't spawn any tornadoes or anything like that. Um, we are always grateful for what nature gives us here in Malaysia. So welcome, and I guess perhaps you've heard it too. The media world is a little bit abuzz about this initial decision text, the draft decision text on the Belém. And let me get it straight because it's important that we make sure that we have the right wording here. Okay, it's called. Let me look at the exact UNFCCC text. So this has come out. I happen to be looking at version of 18th of November 2025 at 7:30 in the morning. It's entitled "A Proposal by the Presidency, the Global Mutirao, Uniting Humanity in a Global Mobilization Against Climate Change." All right, and it takes the form of a standard decision text. There are as usual, preambular paragraphs, I think 11 of them. And have you had a chance to read the preambular paragraphs? Natalie, what do you think of the preambular paragraphs?
Um, I think nothing new. I think the exciting parts were below for sure.
Sorry, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mean, everyone focuses on the operational paragraphs, but every COP decision does have a preamble, and oftentimes the interesting thing about preambles is that they need to establish the basis for what follows. And so you'll see, the preambular paragraphs always begin with words like acknowledging. So they acknowledge that climate change is the key concern. And right away in the opening paragraph, they already talk about the obligation on human rights. And this is not something that you find. You find sometimes that they begin starting with the science of it and the history of it, but right away we go to human rights, we go to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment. We immediately see indigenous peoples and local communities there, migrants, children with persons with disabilities. So I think setting the tone, the presidency in the very first preambular paragraph already opens or rather focuses the objective of this particular decision text. And then in the successive paragraphs, like in the second paragraph, then it goes to talk about, oh, okay, in Paris Agreement, we have as its objective to strengthen the global response to climate change. This is the classic first paragraph, but I think it was very interesting that he began, or the presidency, or this draft text begins with a focus on people first, and then goes into what the Paris Agreement does in terms of Article 2, Paragraph 1, Article 2, Paragraph 2 of the Paris Agreement, jumping further on to then Article 14 of the Paris Agreement that talks about assessing collective progress, and then using the global stocktake, Article 14 of the Paris Agreement. So the standard then running through the basis for the upcoming document. Interestingly, the last few paragraphs in the preamble also have some very, very strong language. The third from the last, recalling with concern that the pre-2020 gaps in both mitigation ambition and implementation by developed country parties, right? And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had earlier indicated that developed countries must reduce emissions by 2025 to 40% below 1990 levels by 2020 was not achieved. Uh, it is very interesting that they've actually gone and pulled this out, because this was, we need to mark some of the key decisions from earlier texts, because it's so important that if we say we're going to do something, that we do it. And if we don't do it, then that has to sort of be bookmarked and pinned down in a way that it's not forgotten, because otherwise, what does that say about this decision? If previous decisions can be taken, and agreed, and yet what's in those decisions is not carried out, then the honesty of this decision, the effectiveness of this current decision is immediately called into question. I mean, it sounds like a legalistic argument, and sometimes a bit emotional, but it's so important to pin these things down. So once again, there was a decision indicating that developed countries must reduce emissions by 25 to 40% below 1990 levels, and that this must happen by 2020. And this was not achieved, and this is pointed out. So having done this, then we could go ahead. And then they talk about the 1.5, talking about, for example, that acknowledging that the historical cumulative net carbon dioxide emissions account already for at least 4/5 of the total carbon budget, for 50% probability of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. So in other words, saying that the development space for developing countries that need to use atmospheric space to develop is already almost exhausted. All right, but you're very, very right, Natalie. The big part of the excitement is actually in the the operation statements, the operational paragraphs of this decision text. Would you like to break it up into the main areas, perhaps? Is it something that you want to help us out with?
Sure. I think a lot of things that I've read so far about everything always seems to boil back down to finance and finance and
Okay,
adaptation. Even the adaptation conversation goes back to finance, right? And
true.
so the few operational paragraphs that we've noted have to do with finance. I think the first one is talking about the the last time the NCGQ promised was uh well, the first one was 100 billion by 2022, right?
That is
And then there
correct,
was
yes.
the new one,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not a very clear definition yet on how it's going to be achieved. Um, there's a lot of talk about what to define as climate finance as well. I was reading this, I think it was just released a few days ago by
Yeah.
Carbon Brief and The Guardian, right? Where they
Yes,
tracked
that's correct.
where the climate finance has been going, and yeah, a lot of it is still in the form of loans, and they question why is some of the funding going to projects on natural gas, and
Mm-hmm.
why are some of the bigger developing countries still getting the funds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would be for number 25, right? Under number 25, talking about finance, where there are a few options. The first option just said, yay, achieved 100 billion in 2022. We look forward to more information whether 2023 achieves that goal. Then the second one says that, oh no, 100 billion has not met. And only 60 billion was received by developing countries on the average of over 2 years. And it notes very clearly that there is a lack of common accounting methodology, um, which is what I mentioned just now, where actually, what do you mean by climate finance? And the third option is even worse, which is no tax.
Yeah, yeah. This is of course the I think you correctly pointed out is paragraph 25 under the second section. The second section is entitled "From Negotiation to Implementation: Paris Agreement Policy Cycle Fully in Motion." All right, so the just to recall what the Paris Agreement policy cycle is, it kind of begins with countries communicating their nationally determined contributions, and then these contributions are all collected and they go through a set of processes, which then sort of comes back in a full circle to the global stock take. All right, so in the end, when you get back to the global stock exchange, then you take stock of everything that has been communicated, you take stock of everything that has been promised or agreed or implemented, and then you assess also at the same time what has been happening vis-a-vis all of these things, because this is not happening in a vacuum. Obviously, it's happening within the realm of all these things. The presidency has kind of taken an interesting um, historical viewpoint on this. In paragraph 14, did you notice, Natalie, what they did was they actually went through all of the 10, or rather the most recent Paris Agreement meetings. They had COP21, and then they go through CMA 1, CMA 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, recalling all of the presidencies and their decisions. And then, as you pointed out in paragraph 25, then they find that, okay, we achieved the 100 billion USD goal in 2022. If you recall, it was 30 billion up through 2020, and beginning in 2020 it was 100 billion a year. It was supposed to be 100 billion a year. So on the first hand, if they've welcomed the achievement of the 100 billion for 2022, and what they're saying is we still don't know, because we're still collecting all the information, whether the goal was actually achieved for 2023. It's already 2025. Right, and you correctly pointed out the NCQG has taken it up to about 300 billion. But this, I think the option one looks like it hinges purely on the number that might or might not come out in time for this particular option to be accepted. Now, if it becomes clear that the 100 billion goal was not met for 2023, then we might have to resort to option two. Now, do you think there are countries that would be okay with option two, Natalie?
I think so, but I think there will be a lot of contention because the global aid budget has been shrinking, and again, US is out. Not that, yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of contention around this.
Um, Yeah, so it reads, note with great concern that USDRM has not been met, noting that only about 60 billion has been received. And yeah, so I mean, while it acknowledges that it has not been met, it also acknowledges that the accounting methodology is something that is still um, uh, very difficult to agree on. I think it's been very clear if you've also been following along that throughout the history of the COP, there's been very little appetite to discuss, to even discuss, much less to agree on definition, working definition for climate finance. Although in the founding document, in the UNFCCC document, it actually does talk about new, additional finance that is not part of existing foreign development assistance. Okay, if do you see do you see it as a huge tragedy if we end up with option three with no text here?
But I personally like the second one precisely because it mentions that we have to clear up the methodology. But
Yeah,
yeah, maybe it's my
yeah.
cynicism, but I feel like we're going to end up with option three.
Yeah, no. I'm, I might, yeah, I'm not much of a pundit, but definitely, there's a very strong possibility that we might end up with option three simply because there might be a lot of pushback on option two. Um, because even while as you correctly point out the aid finances have been shrinking across the board. I think there's also people pointing out that it's not simply that aid finance is shrinking, is that a lot of this finance is moving into other areas, including military activities and as it were, conflict areas. So it's not so much sometimes an issue of the lack of financing. It's very political decisions that govern where finance goes. Okay, so now all this is of course in the second main section that deals with finance. Did you see anything in the first section where they actually it's entitled "United in Celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the Paris Agreement"? It's I don't know. I see this first section as a little bit of a trip down memory lane. They actually go back and talk about what happened in 1992, the adoption of the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, the Paris Agreement in 2015, and but then they sober it with all of these acknowledgements of implementation challenges, of gaps, of barriers, and then they point out where all of these things are highlighted, and that's in the latest synthesis reports of these submissions by the parties. And it's in recalling all of these then that they use it to frame the 2-degree and the 1.5-degree goals, right? And then following that, they kind of show why that half a degree is important for the most vulnerable. So this is what they're talking about when they say that the 1.5 degree is probably the one that we really should be paying attention to, the one which, by the way, we've now breached at least in 2024 for certain, and we're still not certain whether we're going to be able to be out of it in 2025. I think a lot of the data have come in, and the mean average global temperature might already be more than 1.5 or higher than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Anything that you saw in that first section that struck you as well? Nat?
I think really just the 7th point where, as you mentioned, yeah, where they clearly state that, well, they started with the more positive news, right? Like after Paris Agreement, originally, if we didn't have Paris Agreement, we would have increase of 4 degrees.
Yeah,
But after
absolutely.
the Paris Agreement, the increase is just in the range of 1.9 to 2.6. So there is good news that the Paris Agreement has a positive influence. The sad thing is that it's not enough. And yeah, I think that's a very good statement to have. And with the UNEP's emissions gap report that came out before COP as well, I think that show that we are almost like 66%, I think, certain to pass 1.5 already.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, actually the
No,
UNEP report also acknowledges that Paris Agreement did well. Like there is a Paris Agreement, you can't just rubbish the whole agreement. It did achieve positive influence, but it's not enough.
yeah. Now, it's. I think it also, in actually taking that journey to the Paris Agreement, I think they also want to cement the idea that it's not that the Paris Agreement was built out of nothing and hanging in the air. The Paris Agreement actually is the culmination, I think, of all the things that came before, the failed negotiations for the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, the agreements on the first commitment period of the protocol, from 2008 to 2012. All of these things were a learning, and even prior to that, the negotiation of the Kyoto Protocol itself. All of these things served as learning processes for both developed and developing countries, kind of understanding what they might be able to achieve, could achieve, in very real terms, maybe what might be construed as sometimes political suicide. All right, so it is possible to have policies that are so draconian in nature that you actually end up being kicked out of the government, and then what can you do either? So I think that you correctly point out, yes, they've put the Paris Agreement up in center as the kind of culmination of the entire process, and they've pointed out that the achievements to date are not trivial, given how difficult they are. And you're right. I think they do point out that we need much more moving forward. This is, I mean, yes, this is it begins with this set of options in paragraph 25. But it's not the only place in the text. I do need to point out, I forgot to point out, if you see any square brackets in the text, anywhere in the text, then those are also a reflection of text that is not agreed by parties and that needs to be further negotiated. Maybe in the second set of options here in paragraph 35, I think, and this is under the the second section also, a third section maybe. Yeah, it's in the third section, responding to urgency, accelerating implementation, solidarity, and international cooperation. So this section begins at paragraph 28, which is just after below paragraph 25. And this really talks about how we need to accelerate the implementation of our actions to address climate change, both mitigation as well as adaptation. And this particular option, I believe, is on how to handle the national, or rather how to share or report what has been achieved with the idea of uh, accelerating or improving or coming up with more ambitious nationally determined contributions. And mentioned here, I think very, very importantly, is this departure from fossil fuels. Natalie, do you want to take us through the options in paragraph 35?
Sure. So the first one, well, there's stuff in brackets, right? It's either
Ah,
it may
yes,
decide,
yes. So
decide,
yeah,
convene, or invite parties.
yeah.
But yeah, the first one is mainly about sharing, asking the different parties to come together and share their success stories and opportunities in a just, orderly, and equitable transition towards low carbon solutions, taking into account countries' different national circumstances, pathways, and approaches. The second option uses the word encourages, but it talks about calling for the party to cooperate and contribute to global efforts. And it's talking about, I think the main word there is to convene a high-level ministerial roundtable to talk about, again, the same things, countries' different pathways and circumstances, and then to come up with roadmaps, so equitable, just, orderly transition roadmaps. And very clearly, this one states to progressively overcome their dependency on fossil fuels and towards halting and reversing deforestation. Third option is no text. So I think the main difference is the second one has the most details and very, very clearly states overcoming the dependency on fossil fuels, which even then is quite a soft way of putting it. Um, a lot more countries are asking to uh, phase out, right? This one it's progressively overcoming dependency on fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think I share your views on that. Yeah, in all this, there's nothing that should actually be a deal breaker for all of these activities. Um, because neither option really, apart from costs, of course. If you decide to convene a workshop, then you have costs, and if you want to invite parties to attend the workshop, then of course there are also costs, and all of these costs have to be borne, and they are borne from this fund that developed countries do put into, and which I believe the US no longer puts into, despite the fact that I think the US has the largest share or allocated share of this. I think that's very important. But you're just having the workshop to share your success stories. And what those success stories should be is on just, orderly, and equitable transition. So it really calls for just a workshop platform to share some of these things. Then the second one, yeah, you're right. It's a bit more elaborate. It does call for cooperation and contributing to the global efforts. But this is, as you correctly say, it's a softer language. It just encourages. All right. But in spite of that, it does say decides to convene a high-level ministerial roundtable on different national circumstances, pathways, and approaches. And why are you convening this high-level ministerial? Because with a view to supporting countries to develop just, orderly, and equitable transition roadmaps, And these roadmaps, what must they include? They must include ways to progressively overcome the dependency on fossil fuels. So you're right. The second one really prescribes a pathway centered around these high-level ministerial roundtables. But I think the big part here does talk about a just, orderly, and equitable transition, and spreading whomever has been able to achieve part or all of this to A, inform other parties how they did it, and B, to actually identifying new ways of supporting countries that may already be doing it, or may would like to do it, but who need support moving forward. And I think they put a very, very important pin here, condition, by saying including to progressively overcome dependence on fossil fuels. They acknowledge in putting it this way, they acknowledge that fossil fuel maybe is not a fuel of choice for some of these countries. It's a fuel of necessity. This and it sort of I think frames very accurately and very truthfully the idea that there are still many parts of the world where we have extreme poverty, we have still very inhospitable standards of living, unsafe standards of living, and that for many of these developing countries, fossil fuels really are the only way out of this. They already probably suffer from energy poverty, but the need is to overcome these countries' dependency on fossil fuels, and part of this is also related to lifestyle, because when we talk about reversing deforestation, in many parts of the world, deforestation is not due to large-scale logging, but it can actually be due to a dependence on firewood and biomass fuels, for necessities like cooking and maybe like heat. And so I think this option 2 paragraph does point out that dependency. Anything else I missed, Nat, you think?
Nothing much, but I think for me, when I see these two options, it just feels very weak. Like, oh, let's have a meeting to talk about, um, yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't
it
feel very
serves, yeah,
concrete.
it serves as a placeholder, right? So
Yeah.
it's not it's not something that I would say is a deal breaker. It's something that is fairly safe, apart from the costs. Like I said, if you want to conduct any kind of, I mean, but now you can do it online. It's not an issue, right? You can have a virtual workshop, all right, and you can even have a virtual ministers meeting. But if you want to have a ministerial roundtable, I think you do need to bring the ministers in. So option 2 would probably cost more than option 1, particularly if option 1 is a virtual workshop. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we keep moving on down to the next set of options. We've got so we've got a whole bunch of synthesis reports coming out. So we've got an NDC synthesis report, we've got a biennial transparency synthesis report. And the question then is how do we consider these reports? Now that we have these reports, what do we do with them? What do we take from them? What needs to be captured to then feed back into the global stock take? All right. So once again, we need to be sure that as we analyze these reports, we also do a bit of a stock take to see whether what's going on in all of these NDCs and all of these biennial transparency reports actually show that we are either aligning with and aligning with the 1.5 degrees, moving towards net zero, or actually doing something else. So option one is a fairly strong decision, I think. Do you want to take us through that?
Sure. Well, option one talks about, yeah, the NDC report, PTR synthesis report, to address the implementation gap. Talks about uh, the purpose of these reports is to enable the sharing of knowledge and good practices, which would then invite countries to come together and further strengthen their NDCs, which right now is not enough to bring us any close to our Paris Agreement, not even close, right? And yeah, it also talks about, previously there was the commitment to double the energy efficiency improvements, triple the renewable energy capacity, which again we are lagging, sorry. And so, and as well as the we also have made a commitment to reverse deforestation and forest degradation by 2030. All this were not done. So these reports are supposed to help countries meet these goals. The second one is less about a report, but more of like an accelerator, but still a voluntary initiative for the countries to come together and figure and support each other to achieve these goals. And the third one is a roadmap to again identify where are the gaps and how to achieve these goals. So I think the difference is like report, accelerator, roadmap. Which is still quite voluntary, to be honest. I think for all three, it's fine. You have a report. Whether or not you want to take action based on the report and the roadmap is up to you. But I suppose the roadmap, if if it's detailed enough, could give more information and guidance on how countries can go ahead. An accelerator, if combined with a good roadmap, would be great. Maybe they should be combined. But it's all voluntary again. So yeah, I think if a country is proactive, then this would make a lot of sense. But if they don't want to do anything, nothing will happen as well.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Very interesting that they have a roadmap in option three. And also interesting, they don't have an option for no text. So yeah, I think the idea really is okay. I forgot to mention also besides the NDCs and besides the NDCs and the biennial transparency reports, they also talked about aligning it with the LT LEDs. In other words, they're also looking at the long-term low emission development strategies that parties are submitting. And many of these LT-LEDs have a net zero targets in them. All right. And so I guess in option one, they're also trying to capture all of that information. But what I think the big thing they're calling for in option one is to have this annual consideration, which means that for every year that they will actually compile all this information, including as you correctly point out, this information on whether or not they've been able to halt and reverse deforestation and forest degradation, and to do so, conditionally, and that conditional is in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. Very important, that last one, because they're sort of caught a little bit between a rock and a hard place, because we've got local communities, indigenous people saying that they're losing control of their forests, all right, in the name of protecting these forests, reversing deforestation and reducing forest degradation. So they've very carefully conditioned that in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. Yeah, once again, uh, which of these looks the most expensive to you in terms of efforts of countries?
Second one, definitely, because it actually requires people to come together.
Yeah, yeah, I think you might be right, and I think this is the first time we have that this word global implementation accelerator is being used. So you're not sure what it looks like, what kind of animal it is. but I think suffice to say, any of these options, whether it's the Belém Roadmap 1.5, the Implementation Accelerator, or this annual consideration, they all look like they're going to be under this particular, they might be under this mechanism, the Belém Action Mechanism, or the BAM, as they're now calling it. All right, we're almost out of time. Let's see if we can capture at least one more set of options before we move. I think there might be two or three more sets of options, and I think that this next one in paragraph 56 speaks directly to what you were talking about earlier, and you raised in that other paragraph, and that is the establishing the goal of tripling of adaptation finance. Maybe you can take us through those three options.
Sure. Super summarized version in view of the time is just
Yeah.
the first option is to establish the goal to triple adaptation finance. Not sure by 2030 or 2035, in brackets, right?
Yeah, those are
Um,
brackets.
and the second option is just acknowledging that, oh, we need to dramatically scale up adaptation finance. There's no number given. Um, they do mention loss and damage in the second option very specifically.
Yeah.
Third one, a bit softer. They still use the triple the kind. Oh, actually, the third one they just say they urge developed
Urge,
countries,
yeah.
yeah, urge developed countries to at least triple their collective provision of climate finance for adaptation, um, by 2030, and then to launch an annual dialogue on this topic. Um, yeah. So the first one, just establish a goal to triple it. And oh, sorry, the third one also does mention asking the developed countries to at least double their collective provision. Yeah. And then the second one is the weakest one, it just doesn't have any numbers. And the third one, I think, is just a little bit softer than the first one and includes a meeting.
Yeah, the third one might be problematic though because it identifies the source. Right
Mm,
away, it says urges developed country parties. So, it's already a red line for many developed countries who insist that the support needs to come from all sources, and they will very excitedly point out that there are many developing country parties with gross national incomes that are higher per capita GNI that are higher than many developed country parties. And we know who the usual suspects are in this regard. But yeah, immediately there's what might be considered a red line in the first four words of option three, when you urge developed country parties. Um, yeah, I think that once again there are other perhaps pink lines, if not red lines, in some of the other as well. You can establish the goal as long as sometimes you don't say who is supposed to contribute to that goal. Sometimes it's interesting that you can have a goal, but somehow leave the target date open, and you'll notice that even the words from public sources in option one, you notice that the word from public sources is also bracketed, because once again that is as contentious as saying from developed country parties. So there are a number of these as it were very contentious phrases in there. Um, uh, I think also it's a bit prescriptive, the option one, deciding that the adaptation must be channeled through the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, the Least Developed Countries Fund, and the Special Climate Change Fund. Some might see this channeling as an attempt to control the funds. For example, if it does go to the Adaptation Fund, then the Adaptation Fund board actually will have a fairly strong control over how these funds are allocated. And then, of course, if it goes to the least developed countries fund, then it's only if you're a least developed country that you will get to receive a share of those proceeds. So in terms of the negotiations, a lot of things here to unpack, and it's no secret why I guess then is that this draft text is receiving so much interest and so much analysis. What do you think, Natalie?
Yeah, and I think this will have to be discussed together with the broader climate finance scope. Does the climate finance target include adaptation finance? Is it just mitigation? Um, yeah, I think that has to be cleared up as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Some of the remaining options deal with the Belém work program, a Belém proposal for establishing a Belém global de-risking project preparation and development facility. And then once again, things that are contentious, urging developed country parties to capitalize the facility. I think all of these things are potential tripwires in the negotiation. And it will be very interesting to see. Now, you will notice that paragraph 57 does have a no text option, just in case none of these options survive the remaining negotiations. But we will maybe perhaps even as we look at this further, try and find out what other organizations' views are on this draft text document, the first to be released, as it were, by the presidency, with very, very strong indications on where the focal areas are, or where the focal areas should be moving forward. Um, what else do you see from this draft text, Natalie?
I'm personally super interested in number 58, which is on the unilateral measures, and seems to be very, very targeted at the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism. And I find the discussions very intriguing, where the developing countries, and especially there's the LMDC, Saudi Arabia, India, where they're talking about CBAM, which essentially EU CBAM is charging a carbon tax on all imports. And so developing countries are saying that this is a reverse of climate finance. So why are developing countries having to pay this so-called carbon tax to EU, which is a developed country? But then on EU and the UK are arguing that, well, this is us preventing carbon leakage,
Leakage,
and
yeah.
well, they claim that they are providing capacity building for developing countries as well to transition.
Yeah,
And to be fair as well, like if the developing country itself has a carbon tax, then and it's equal to the CBAM, then they don't have to pay.
yeah.
So yeah, I think there's so much to unpack in this area, and it's so interesting. For example, Malaysia, we're also exploring a carbon tax, right? I don't think we can. It's difficult. It's difficult for our economy for sure, but this kind of so-called unilateral measures by EU, is it doing more harm than good, or is it pushing and accelerating the low carbon transition? I don't know. I think it's a good
Yeah, so,
discussion.
so that yeah, that's the the discussion that's ongoing. Is the EU giving out the climate finance with one hand and taking it back with the other hand through the CBAM, in the name of preventing carbon leakage? We could probably spend another 2 hours going through the nitty-gritty of this draft decision if we wanted, but it's been a pleasure having your views here, Natalie. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure that the Edge will be covering this a lot moving forward, keeping an eye out for what's going on in the last few closing hours of the COP. Almost invariably, I believe this COP is going to run over time because the way I look at it, that a lot of work still needs to be done on these decisions moving forward. The ministers have their work cut out for them, and we've been a bit unfair in taking too much time from the next presenters. But I'd just like to very much thank you, Natalie, for joining me, and thanks also to the team back there waiting to get the next bit of programming on. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on Climate Governance Malaysia's parallel coverage for the COP. Thank you, Natalie, for joining me on A
Thank
Paradigm of
you.
Progress.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.
A big thank you to Dr. Gary and Ms. Natalie for their insightful discussion. So now moving on, I'd like to move on to the next session, which will be the C-Suites highlight, which will be moderated by Mr. Karl Godderis, CEO of EUROCham, Malaysia, together with our speaker, Datuk Shahril Azuar Jimin, Chief Sustainability Officer of Maybank Group Malaysia. The floor is yours for the both of you.
Thank you very much, Aaron, and a very warm welcome, everybody, for the 9th episode of our daily C-Suite highlights, where we talk with a senior business leader in Malaysia about COP-related topics. Today, we are talking with Datuk Shahril Azuar Jimin, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Maybank. Datuk, very warm welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Carl. Morning to all the listeners out there.
Yeah. So today's theme is Paradigm for Progress, and the topics underneath we are going to discuss are advancing just transitions, green technology exchange, and cross-border collaboration. Datu, before we get into those technical topics, I want to start first with a more personal question. So when you grew up, how exposed were you to environment and nature? And how do you think that has later down the track influenced your sense of responsibility for younger generations and the way you make business decisions, particularly the way or why you decided to take on your current role with Maybank as Chief Sustainability Officer?
Okay, I'm not sure where this question comes from, but I can talk a lot about it, and I'm very happy to talk a lot about it. Essentially, I grew up on the fringes of the jungle, rainforest, right? So my father was he's still around, 84 years old, God bless him. He was an anthropologist, and for the longest time, he worked in the Aboriginal Affairs Department, Orang Asli. Yeah, he worked in Orang Asli, culminating in firstly Deputy Director General of the Orang Asli Department, and then later before that, Deputy Director General, and then culminating in a Director General. And it was something that he loved. And because of that, we stayed in the government quarters. And we stayed in the government quarters, which was, some people may know, they call it Batu 12 Gombak, right? It's far away. It's far away, fringing Gombak, and really it's fringing the rainforest, yeah, fringing the forest. And it was lovely. It was far to go to school. I went to school in KL for my primary school, but and we had to leave home early to go to school. But then when we came back, it was nice because number one, it was a very safe environment, and my parents would just let us go. We could cycle everywhere, and we would see animals. We would see the flora and fauna. I mean, literally bordering the forest. And this was the time when there was no East-West Highway yet, or rather Karak Highway. Yeah, so there was no Karak Highway. It was really cold in the morning, and it was really nice. Sometimes you get some big cats coming, some big cats coming, and many other animals. Yeah, but you learn to live with them. So I had my interaction with wildlife far earlier than most people, given that my father was, as I said, a Director General of the Orang Asli Affairs Department, and he spent probably 1 or 2 weeks every month in the jungle. He just loved it. He just loved it. I did try to ask him, can I go with you? And I said no. Yeah, so because you go by helicopter, and then. And that shaped my thinking a lot, because then you sense, wow, and you see a lot of flora and fauna. You come back from school, I would play and I would take the bicycle, and sometimes we would come across animals, and we coexisted. I think that's the one important lesson that I learned, that we can coexist, and we can work together with all the orang asli for the betterment. And that is happening now. But I was doing that in the 70s. Wow, that was, imagine, 50 years ago, yeah? And we were already doing that. And now suddenly it's, well, people are talking about, come, let's work together, support the orang asli, so on. So that shaped me quite a bit, Carl, in terms of my approach.
Okay. Now, the reference you made to your father is helpful for our next topic, because we need to talk about the core challenge of a just transition. The word itself might be a very elegant concept, but in reality, what it likely means is that throughout the transition, some communities will win, but some might get disrupted and might even lose a bit. So how do we balance the urgency of decarbonization also with the responsibility of protecting livelihoods and dignity of certain communities? Like in Malaysia, people living closest to regions that depend on coal, on palm oil, or even heavily depend on SME regions. And if you don't handle that well, what kind of backlash do you think we risk as a country here in Malaysia?
So it's contingent on the big organizations which have the power to make change. I would think so. Yeah, and that's everybody. So for example, for Maybank, in terms of our loan and how we incorporate ESG considerations into credit, one of the things, for example, is free and prior informed consent. We need free prior informed consent of the communities before we will approve any loan proposal to develop any part or any area. So that is not necessarily easy because when we do that, then we see the dynamics and even internally, and I'm sharing here the internal challenges that we have as a bank, and many banks, you chase targets, right? You chase targets. So my business guys, senior business guys, they want to get the business. The sustainability people, we want to be the guardians of the universe, right? So halfway, and that discussion can be very robust, and it can be well, it can be brutal as well, that discussion, yeah. So, but I think as long as you allow for that discussion, then it's okay. So, for example, in Maybank, we have our Exco Sustainability Committee as part of the governance process, and the Exco Sustainability Committee is chaired by the Group President and CEO of Maybank. And we also, above that, have a Board Sustainability Committee that is chaired by an independent director. So, and when we go through this process, it's that we need to manage that dynamic, yeah, because it's not just about business. So, example, business deals come to this EXCO Sustainability Committee if it has any bearing on ESG, and we have, surprisingly, we have declined many businesses. I would probably say about 40% of the business proposals or loan application we have declined because we feel that it is not aligned to our aspirations. It is not aligned to our ethos, yeah, humanizing financial services, because number one, it will if affect the environment negatively, it will affect communities negatively, and so on. So what needs to happen is allow for that robust discussion.
Now, you already introduced the role of banks in assuring a just transition from particularly a social point of view. We also want to talk today about the role of banks when it comes to green technology exchange, because you have the position as a financing organization to either accelerate or slow down technology development, depending on how you price risk or evaluate collateral. So where is Maybank positioned in terms of financing technology and deciding when it's too soon or timely enough to invest or to finance technology players? And in that context, as one of the largest financing or bank in the country, So how do you avoid, or how do we use the financial ecosystem to avoid that we become more of a buyer of foreign green technology than a co-creator of such technology?
Well, because of the Industrial Revolution, we are where we are today with all these carbon emissions in the last 1 to 100 years, and that is because of technology, given the Industrial Revolution. So what I like to say is that technology got us here in the present state that we are. Because of and it brought us a lot of development, but it also brought us negative impacts, negative and harmful effects. But although it is technology that got us here, it will be technology that will take us out of this. I am a strong believer in that. So there's a lot of technologies now, that has been worked on, and Maybank has been supporting many of these technologies. Initially, just a few years ago, things as basic as geospatial technology, in terms of um, looking at loan potential, and now we've moved to incorporating AI. Yeah, we moved into incorporating AI as much as we can. We're not rushing it. We're taking a very cautious approach because at the end of the day, it is still a loan decision, and any loan decision can have an impact uh, in many forms. That loan that the policy that you write, that loan that you approve, can change the life of that SME, can change the life of that business, can change the life of people in the communities. Yeah, so we are taking it a very cautious approach. But having said that, we are really moving ahead on technology. We're really moving ahead on AI. So one of the example, of course, a lot of the work we do is addressing the impacts of climate change. Yeah? So we actually have climate change methodologies that whereby we are incorporating climate risk into borrower risk rating, for example. Yeah, something that you wouldn't do 10 years ago, right? So now we're looking at how we incorporate um, climate risk into borrower risk rating. It's something like, no, it's very interesting, but it is very necessary to do so. And we're seeing, and I have special teams within my sustainability operations working on this, setting targets. So, for example, one of the things that we've done, it was set net zero targets for 6 industry sectors. These are the
Mm-hmm.
big industry sectors, yeah. And this with 2030 targets and net zero until 2050, the big industry sectors. So, and with that, we engage our clients. We train our relationship managers. How can they talk to our clients? And it's not always easy, yeah? Because how do you talk to a factory owner about the impacts of climate change? So what we've done is that we've even scripted that how they can talk. So we've come up with client engagement guidebook. We have come up with um, carbon calculator. Yeah, we have a carbon calculator that when somebody applies for a loan, then we are able to calculate the impact of that loan for carbon. And these were all developed internally. So ultimately, we have that portfolio emission path towards net zero, and it's a long-term play. Yep, 2030 are the targets, indicators, and going towards 2050, but it is something that we have to do.
Yeah. Now, I understand that at tactical level, you're already doing a lot to facilitate the financing from the bank into green technology. But as part of this COP program, we also interviewed the founder of SolarVest, which is one of the larger Malaysian solar players, and they also have business across ASEAN. Now, recently they announced for financing a very fundamental joint venture with Brookfield, which is a global investor, but actually at origin, a Canadian pension fund. So I just wonder, why does Malaysia need to use pension money from Canadians to finance its green technology revolution? Do you see a bigger role there for our own domestic pension funds to step into that process?
Oh yes, but these are the wish of investors. They want to diversify the investment and they want to put their money in these kind of areas. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
and we explain to them, yeah, the imperatives behind this, how it works, and we've seen a large interest among pension funds, investment managers in terms of putting money. So the narrative that um, sustainable investment is taking a backseat, or sustainable investment is doing about turn. I don't think that's true, because we've seen at least in ASEAN that the figures keep on increasing, and we seem to be continuing what we are doing.
Yeah. Now, since you bring up ASEAN, I want to talk also a bit about cross-border collaboration and regional leadership, particularly now that Malaysia just finished its ASEAN presidency. Now, we look at ASEAN from a sustainability point of view. Progress is a bit uneven. Some countries are a lot more ahead than others, whether it's either from perspective of policy or finance. So what role do you think Malaysia can play to shape a more coherent region-wide transition agenda, talking, for example, about harmonizing taxonomies, carbon markets, or regional financing frameworks? Do you see there a particular role for Malaysia as a country, or even Malaysia's banking ecosystem, considering like Maybank, you're also present in other Southeast Asian countries?
Yes, it's with what's happening in the world today, that is actually an opportunity for us in ASEAN to rise. There's some opportunity for many of the countries and organizations in ASEAN to take a leadership role. And I think that's important. And we've seen that, no doubt, some countries are behind, but it's increasing. So we have seen, for example, the ASEAN taxonomy that's developed out of the ASEAN Secretariat. It's actually the first iteration was 4 years ago, and it's already four editions. Yep. So that's how much interaction, that's how much development that is there. Because I think countries want to make sure that we are aligned with number one, global principles, number two, among intra-ASEAN countries. So it's very important. So, for example, recently, and this has been announced about 2 months, 3 months ago, Malaysia, Maybank, we came up with our first ever transition finance deal, and that's a difficult one. We came up with our first ever transition finance deal as a syndication with two Singapore banks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, out of Singapore. It's a power plant. Yeah, so it was good. So we see that collaboration, and it's not a bloody battle. Yeah, because there's enough space for everyone. I feel that there is no shortage of liquidity. Many banks can come in and do what they need to do and to support all various national agendas. So certainly within the ASEAN region, yes, there are laggards, but to a large extent, many are coming up, but in various ways, in various ways. So, for example, in the Philippines, they've recently come up with the green taxonomy, yeah, and they want to focus on electric vehicles, for example. Yeah? So that's that. I think that's fine, but we have a lens from the ASEAN. We look at that from ASEAN taxonomy perspective and whatever. So bottom line, in the region, we can progress together, and we can even potentially try to take a leadership position within us, Asia.
Okay. I'm aware of your time constraints, so I'll start wrapping up. Throughout your responses, I sense you look at sustainability more from an opportunity point of view, also talking on behalf of Maybank. But climate action is obviously a very complex change management process where some of the decisions we need to make now will have a longer term benefit or impact. So looking at Malaysia from both the perspective of corporate and political leadership, what are, in your mind, some of the hard decisions that should be taken rather quickly than later?
So yes, we have been looking at things from an opportunity perspective. But that is also largely because we have been embedding risk. So we have been embedding risk in our sustainability operations. We've been pricing risk, and it's come to stage that it's a given. Yeah, it's a given. So now you need, because of, especially in Malaysia, the various Bank Negara, Central Bank and Securities Commission, the various taxonomies that have come up, yeah, and very robust, yeah, very robust. So they look at from a risk perspective. Some of them are principle-based. Oh, so that's fine. So hence, we look at it from opportunity as well, not to say that we don't look at it from risk. So one of the things that I feel, as if I were to end this, and I feel we can all do better here, is to incorporate a stronger social agenda and social outcomes in what we do. Because at the end of the day, when we undertake climate action, it is still about the people. It is still about, we need to ensure that our communities are able to continue living in the manner that they have been, and they also are given opportunities and so on. So it's not just about the big banks and big money. The communities are key and central to this. So I feel and I wish that banks and financial institutions factor that clearly first. How would this have an impact on the local community? How would financing this land reclamation in Port Dickson have a negative effect on the fishermen communities there? So those are the things that need to be brought up front, I feel.
Okay, so last quick question for you, Datu. Is Maybank present at the COP conference? And what are your expectations as an outcome of the conference?
Yes. Karl, Maybank is present at COP30
That's good.
in Belém and Rio. So Maybank is a sponsor to the Malaysian delegation. Yeah, so the sponsor. So we have our presence there in terms of what we do. And one of the things that we are showcasing there, given that it's in the Amazon jungle, our effort on tiger conservation. Maybank is the biggest supporter of tiger conservation in Malaysia for the last 12, 14 years. We were working with WWF, huge amounts of money. So we showcase what we do there as well. I am obviously here with you, but maybe we are also contributing to less carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, I know you have to go, Datu. I thank you very much for your insights and also your personal touch. And I wish you and the bank all the best with climate action. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Karl. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dato, and thank you, Mr. Karl, for the session. So we'd like to move on to the next segment, which is the Live from Belém segment. So we would like to welcome Mr. Edmond Rhys, Partner and Director, Climate for the Climate Policy and Regulation of the Boston Consulting Group of the UK office. So we'll now like to pass the floor to him, and he'll be giving his remarks live from Belém.
Hey, hello, everybody. Greetings from Belém. I will try and start my video, but one of the challenges with being in Belém is that the internet connection can be a little bit unpredictable and weak, so apologies for that. I have tried to start it, but I think I'm blocked by the host, so let me know if that works later. So yeah, my name is Edmond Rhys-Jones. I'm a partner director at Boston Consulting Group. I have led our support for successive COP presidencies and the high-level champions team since 2019. I'm also a former lawyer, international lawyer, and former diplomat for the UK government, with postings in the United States and in Asia. What I thought it might be useful today is to give you an update on what are the kind of where are we in the process in this quite intense 2 weeks. What is on the table and where might we get to by the end of the week on the negotiation side and on the action agenda side. And I believe I've got time with you tomorrow where we can do more of a deep dive on some of the specific topics that have made progress on the action agenda side. I hope that's helpful. I look forward to any questions or comments you have in the chat or whatever other process you'd like to follow. So look, firstly, maybe take a very quick step back in terms of where this COP is in the overall process. COP30, it genuinely is an important COP because it marks the end of the first full circle kind of cycle of the Paris Agreement process. We had a global stocktake in the UAE, in Dubai, where the world decided what it needed to do to get back on track. We then had a conversation about finance for the global south in Baku last year. And then this year is when countries' individual ambitions were submitted to the COP. And that is the challenge in a way that this COP, this conference of parties, almost 200 parties, needed to respond to. So it is a big moment in the COP process, and it's also a big moment, I think, symbolically, because of course it was kicked off in Rio over almost 3 decades ago, and is now returned to Belém. And in terms of where we are in the process over the 2 weeks, today marked almost the kind of formal end of the action agenda part of the process. So there's kind of a formal piece, which is all 200 governments negotiating text and increasingly just holding each other accountable to delivering the things that they'd already agreed to do. So that's the formal piece. So large tables, people sitting around large tables with small flags, and it's very formal. And then there's the action agenda side of things, which is ambitious countries, ambitious companies, civil society, working on specific parts of the climate problem. And coming together. And you don't need all 200 countries, you don't need every member of any given sector or value chain to make progress. What has been, that action agenda piece started in Paris. It really picked up steam in Glasgow, COP26, the first COP I supported, with a lot of business leaders there. And what happened today in I think quite an inspiring and important moment at this COP is that action agenda side of the process was really elevated and recognized as of equal value and weight to the overall COP, right? Because it's that side of the process which this year particularly we're able to point to some real progress. We're able to point to finance being committed, to projects being delivered, to coordination on policy and regulations between particular countries, for instance, on carbon standards and these kinds of carbon accounting standards, on book and claim regimes for the cement industry, all these pieces. So this is all happening in the action agenda. It used to be treated as a bit of a sideshow, a bit of a it was a nice atmospherics, nice comms, nice announcements. I think now it's being recognized as actually this is part of the way we're going to solve this problem. So that was a great step forward today, and I look forward to sharing some of the detail with you tomorrow on what has been agreed in some of the key areas there. But on the negotiation side of the agenda, we are still 2 days until we are supposed to close the negotiations on Friday afternoon. There is already, if any of you are betting people, then you can place a bet on when negotiations will actually close, because they almost always run long. And so the current betting is, the current median bet is that they'll close at 6:38 p.m. on Saturday. So almost 24 hours over time. The presidency has put forward a quite ambitious package. We weren't quite sure what we would get at this COP, whether it would be a very process-focused COP or whether we would really try and deliver something ambitious. And it turns out that the presidency has picked up quite an ambitious agenda. And there are really, at this stage, draft texts flying around between the parties with 4 key issues on them, or certainly 4 that I think are maybe of interest to this group. And they're all interrelated in order to make the overall package palatable. So I'm going to start with the roadmap on fossil fuels. You may have seen this in the press. So in Dubai, there was an agreement to transition away from fossil fuels, was the language that all 200 countries agreed to. But there was no date on that. There was no real sense of pace or allocation of responsibility between the parties, how that was going to work in practice. What has happened at this COP is that around 80 countries have come forward and said, what we need is a roadmap that actually sets out how we are going to transition away from fossil fuels. What they mean is that this is it's a little bit unclear about what exactly that means in practice. Does that mean, for instance, setting in place some specific timelines of when, at what pace the transition needs to happen? Does it mean talking about some of the enablers that need to happen to get put in place in order to achieve the transition, et cetera, et cetera? So there are 80 countries that are keen on that happening, and there are about 30 countries that are very vehemently opposed, including Saudi Arabia, Russia, and there are a couple of others that we will see where they land when they come forward. So landing that would be quite a major step forward in terms of clarity on the pace and shape of the transition, which one would expect would start to filter down into national policies, which will of course have commercial implications for the companies represented on this call. So I think that's a really important one to watch. A second major piece on the other side of the agenda is on adaptation. So the adaptation and resilience agenda, there is a global goal around adaptation, but it's never really been defined what exactly we mean by that. So we know what we mean by mitigation. It's 1.52 degrees. We know what it takes to achieve that in terms of emissions. But on the adaptation side, it's not clear. There's been a long-running process to get to a list of indicators, right? Key performance indicators. And they started with thousands of these prospective indicators. They've now got down to 100. The practical import of those indicators means that any given government is able to set out how they are doing against delivery on those KPIs. They can engage in a discussion with their stakeholders, with their ministries, with their subnational actors. And importantly, they can engage in a conversation with finance, with multilateral development banks, with development finance institutions around where they are, what they need, and start measuring progress towards minimizing their vulnerability to climate change. So that would be a great step forward. Unfortunately, many parties, particularly those in Africa, don't want to sign off on those indicators unless there is more money put on the table in order to fund those adaptation efforts, because they are concerned that they'll be held to account to deliver on indicators without having any actual money to deliver that progress. And so that links to the third major piece, which is around finance. There's a kind of subpart of this, which is about adaptation finance particularly, which is about how do you triple, will the parties agree to triple adaptation finance in absolute terms? Far more is spent on mitigation and adaptation. So there's a desire to push up the amount of money being spent on adaptation. And then there's a much broader finance agenda, as you can imagine. Is about global financial flows coming from the global south into the from the global north into the global south. There was an agreement that the global south required, and by that I mean emerging market developing countries, needed 1.3 trillion by 2035 in order to deliver climate action. And around 380 billion of that needed to be public funding from global north governments. And again, there was a target that was set last year in Baku, but again, getting really specific about how are we going to get that money moving, how much from whom, by when, between now, 2025 and 2035. So we're not waiting, so that we can make progress much faster, people can act with more confidence. that is something that was a proposal was put forward by the presidency on how to do that. The parties, as the full 200, need to respond to that ideally, and give it support. So again, we can move forward. Now, for those of you represented on this call, what that will mean in practice, if that is agreed, is it's yet one more shove in the direction of getting public international finance flowing, which we know needs to be a minority of the total financing pool. So, you know, it's kind of it's around 40%, 50% of the total, but it is a major unlock because it takes risk off the table and can get private finance flowing, and it can get domestic public finance flowing as well. So that piece is a key part. And then finally, the fourth major topic, and then I'm happy to pause for any questions or comments from the group. The fourth major topic has been around trade. So again, I'm sure many of you on this call will be acutely aware of the EU putting in place what's called CBAMs, or carbon border adjustment measures, kind of carbon border tax, by which the EU is looking to protect its own industries as it enforces the carbon price on them to decarbonize, because it doesn't want them to therefore be at a competitive disadvantage versus high carbon imports. So steel, for example, aluminum. This has been heavily opposed by many emerging markets who feel that it's just a form of protectionism. They shouldn't have to pay a carbon border tax because they are trying to decarbonize their own industries, and this sets them at a disadvantage. Trade has never come onto the agenda at COP. It is always lurked in the background, been part of the rhetoric, but there has never been a formal conversation of how do we actually organize our global trade regime in a way which facilitates the energy transition and is not used as a cover. The climate is not used as a cover for trade protectionism, and it's particularly it's obviously a particularly key issue at the moment, given the huge competition there is for green value chains, the EU's efforts on CBAMs, and the US pullback on international trade in a position of tariffs. So final major piece of the puzzle will be whether trade is moved into the onto the agenda, and there is some language around setting up a process by which the parties discuss the future of trade and climate and that nexus. So those are the four big pieces. Now, the objective today, and I need to keep an eye on the news ticker, the objective today is that we'll get some of those things agreed whilst President Lula was here, and then the other pieces would get agreed at the end of the COP on Friday, Saturday. I'm not aware that's ever happened before. What tends to happen in these negotiations, as I'm sure you're all aware from commercial negotiations, is that nothing's agreed until everything is agreed. Parties don't want to give something away on Wednesday in the hope that they get something on Friday. So let's see. But it may be that actually what happens is that everything is left until those final moments. And then I guess final point, and then I'll turn to questions and comments. You know, there is real political jeopardy in these negotiations. I think there's sometimes a sense that this must all be pre-baked. Surely you don't bring 200 countries together and 50,000 people if you're not clear you're going to get a deal. But it's very far from the case. There is real live negotiations going on with very tired negotiators and ministers trying to make this work, piece this puzzle together. Okay, that's great. I'll pause there. And I think there's one question in the chat about AI. Should I read it out, or can everyone see that one? It's a question around whether commenting on recent AI research and the emissions associated with it, and the huge energy growth associated with it, and whether that will increase as the complexity of the LLMs, kind of GPT-3, GPT-4, etc., go up and up. I think so. I've done a bit of work on this with colleagues. Certainly, the view of the International Energy Agency is that the potential that AI has to contribute to addressing climate change far outweighs the carbon footprint of the technology itself. Now, That obviously depends on having a kind of a positive and optimistic view of the potential of AI, frankly, in general, let alone on climate. I think that makes sense though, right? Because I think if we find that AI has real world practical applications, there's no particular reason why it wouldn't have real world practical applications in the climate space. And there are several ways that one can imagine, and one that we know of, that it could make a difference. For example, running virtual power plants on energy grids in a way that allows us to get more renewables onto the grid faster, reducing transmission distribution requirements by running dynamic line ratings on transmission lines, new materials for CCUS, optimizing nuclear fusion, tracking methane leaks. There's a whole bunch of applications where one can imagine AI having a huge role to play in helping us deliver on climate action. On the other side, of course, we already know that the power demand from AI is increasing. In the US, at least, it accounts for something like 40% of projected growth in energy demand between now and I think kind of 2030, 2035. The rest of it's coming out of electrification of energy and transport. So it is a big driver. That's all of data centers, by the way, not just AI. So it is a big driver. But I think even there is an opportunity to leverage that growth to bring more renewables online, because most of those big hyperscalers tend to have climate commitments in place. And therefore, actually, if we can find novel ways of saying that bring it online, but let's turn a nuclear power plant back on, as actually happened in I think it was 3 Mile Island, or buying renewable energy certificates so that you can offset your energy. So I'm a glass half full guy on the AI energy piece. I think if AI is going to be valuable and we end up using a lot of it, it's going to be helpful in climate, and we can hopefully use that demand lever as we go forward. But thanks for the question. I hope I've addressed it. Happy to take any follow-up. Any other questions or comments from the group?
So thank you, Mr. Edmond. Seeing as there's no comments or questions regarding this, but thank you so much for joining us today, especially live from Belém. And yes, luckily the internet connection is quite good. So now we would like to move on to the next section, which is the NGO Pavilion by WWF. So that has been thoughtfully curated by them. So today's keynote speaker from WWF Malaysia would be Dr. Robecca Jumin, who's the head of conservation in Sabah for WWF Malaysia. So let us please welcome Dr. Robecca to give her remarks.
Hi everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to share our work on living landscape that we are doing here in Sabah. And without much ado, I would like to share a PowerPoint. So I'm sharing today our living landscape approach, which we have adopted in our Sabah Landscapes program. But I would like to begin with the end in mind. This is WWF Malaysia's vision for Sabah, that by 2030, Sabah's biodiversity, ecosystem services, and agricultural systems are valued, protected, and responsibly managed, are climate resilient, and bring benefit to both people and nature. So since we are here in Sabah, yes, of course, this is supporting state governments' policies and WWF global goals, the SDGs, and also supporting the Sabah state government's aspiration to retain 50% of its land mass under the natural forest cover and 30% of totally protected area, and also supporting the Malaysian government's mandatory 100% MSPO certification, and subsequently supporting Sabah's 100% RSPO target by 2030. So this also support WWF global goal of having zero loss of natural habitat, zero extinction of wildlife, halving negative impacts of production and consumption, and amplifying locally led conservation where communities are part of the environmental stewardship. So a little bit of background on Sabah, to whom that may not be familiar with Sabah. This is a state on the northern part of Borneo, on the eastern Malaysia. Sabah has more than 50% forest cover currently out of its 7.34 million hectares. And it has set a target of 30% TPA, totally protected area, which is currently at 27%. The last survey census indicates that we have 1,000 elephants, Bornean elephants in the wild, around 11,000 orangutans, based on the 2013 survey, and I think this statistic is still valid. Around 326 wild cattle or the Bornean Banteng. This is based on the Sabah Banteng Action Plan that was revised last year. The reason why I have focused on wild cattle or the banteng is that the population, the number is so low that we think that we need special attention given to this species, because if not, then this might be the next that will go extinct locally. Sabah is also very important in terms of oil palm production. So oil palm planted area here in Sabah is about 1.51 million hectares as of 2022. And the CPO production is about 4.27 million tons in 2024, making Sabah the largest CPO producer in Malaysia with a market share of 22.1%. These numbers, this oil palm numbers, is a major, shows that oil palm is a major land use and economic sector in Sabah, with implications for land use planning, biodiversity conservation, and development policy. So indeed, Sabah is very rich in biodiversity and culture. We have diverse ecosystems from mangrove, from the forests, from the mountaintops to the mangroves at the intersection of the marine to the coral reefs. We have rich wildlife. We have orangutan, we have elephants, and we have other wildlife as well. And we have, of course, people who has a very diverse culture and tradition as well. Very rich indeed, and but these are under threats from various threats, including from ecosystem loss to due to conversion to agriculture and unsustainable logging, unsustainable development, species loss due to human-wildlife conflict and illegal wildlife trade, among others. And of course, we thought that climate change is an emerging threat, but no, it is not an emerging threat. It is here now. We have experienced extreme climate change impact like floods, landslides, and even property damage here in Sabah in recent time. For WWF-Malaysia, we have selected a few, 7 conservation targets and goals, from natural forest to mangrove, from orangutan to banteng to Bornean elephant, and traffic species, especially pangolin and elephant. And we have especially a human well-being target, a goal that by 2030, communities from priority landscapes within our program are empowered to participate in conservation efforts and benefit from sustainable livelihoods. This is an indication that we put an emphasis on the role of communities, not just as part of the, not just the beneficiary, but also part of the steward for environmental sustainability. So just in a nutshell, I'm sharing this just in a nutshell before I go into the concept of living landscape as a paradigm of progress. Again, this is our vision, and we have adopted the living landscape approach, which is an integrated landscape management that promote balance, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable development under the organizing framework of 3 pillars of protect, produce, and restore, where under the protect pillars, we identify and conserve remaining forests, wildlife, and rivers. Under the produce pillar, we support the production of RSPO certified sustainable palm oil in Sabah, in line with the aspiration of the Sabah state government to have 100% RSPO certification under the jurisdictional approach initiative by 2030, and restore to support restoration and establishment of especially wildlife corridors to connect fragmented forests that will serve as a connectivity for wildlife, as well for their survival, as well as their climate resilience. And as mentioned earlier, this initiative, this program, support the Sabah policies and including the SDGs. And we have a few priority areas to demonstrate the living landscape approach at the landscape level. We have the Tabin landscape, which is part of the Lahadatu district. We have the Tawau Kunak landscape, which is part of the Tawau and also Kunak districts on the eastern coast of Sabah. And we also support protection of biodiversity within the Heart of Borneo boundary, in line with the contributing to the Heart of Borneo initiative. So why a living landscape approach? So we are we recognize the need for development for Sabah, and this include developing areas for agriculture, especially the palm oil sector here in Sabah. And there are also other needs for development in Sabah as Sabah grow towards development. So we have adopted a living landscape approach that provides the organizing framework for all stakeholders to collaborate on attaining common goals associated with the entire spectrum of environmental sustainability. So under the protect pillars, we protecting forests, watersheds and rivers, and wildlife within the protect spaces. These are the forest reserves, HCV's area, watersheds that have been put aside for protection. Under the produce space, we work with stakeholders to produce sustainable palm oil to support the future proofing of the industry, to make sure that what is done within that produce space is able to continue to grow sustainably and compete competitively in the market, while also maintaining what biodiversity they have within their landscape, and restoring and establishing corridors to connect fragmented forests for species survival and climate resilience. So I would like to share a case study of the an implementation of this living landscape approach in one of our landscape. I'm taking Tabin landscape as an example, where we have a target of supporting the protection of forests, 157,000 hectares of forest reserve. 148,000 of that is within TPA. Wildlife population within that landscape, circa 1,250 orangutan, banteng, 50, and elephant, circa 350, and also freshwater ecosystem. Under the produce, we have a target of supporting 15,000 hectares of middle and small size growers to be RSPO certified through the stepwise approach of MSPO and then RSPO. And then under the restore pillar, we have a target of supporting the restoration of 200 hectares of wildlife corridors, and we currently have 3 identified corridors: the Bagahak corridor connecting Tabin Wildlife Reserve and the Silabukan Forest Reserve. Bukit Tabin, which is connecting also the Silabukan Kecil and also the Tabin Wildlife Reserve, and also the Silabukan Kecil Forest Reserve itself. So under the Protect pillar, we are working with the Town and Regional Planning Department to establish a district plan for the district of Lahadatuk, which is wider than the Tabin landscape itself. So we, through this initiative, we are ensuring that the land users within that area have some element of permanency, where if the area has been identified as a protected area or corridor, it will be recognized as such, and that will be recorded in the district plan as for that purpose. So this is a multi-stakeholder process where everyone will have to come together to agree on a long-term plan for the whole district. And this will make sure that all the conflicting interests for land use is addressed. We also look into working with oil palm plantations and the Sabah Wildlife Department to ensure that there is a reduction in human-elephant conflict through installation of electric fencing. And we are at a stage where we are looking at the effectiveness of the fences that has been installed, maintenance, and making sure that they are functional. And we also we have established ecological network for orangutan and continue to monitor population within that area to ensure that there's no new emerging threats, and they are able to continue to utilize, they are able to move within fragmented forests through the corridors that has been established, the Bagahak Ecology Corridor and also the Bukit Tabin Wildlife Corridor. And this work is done together with Sabah Forestry Department, Sawit Kinabalu, and the KL Kepung and Bora. So another initiative is through the Protect and Restore pillar. This is some examples of how the corridor are being established and restored based on the target species. For example, the Bagahak Wildlife Corridor is especially targeting arboreal species like orangutan to make sure that they're able to move between these 2 reserves. Whereas for the banteng habitat enrichment, we also support restoration or enrichment of banteng habitat so that the banteng population is able to increase in this area. And so far, this has shown positive indication of increasing population of banteng in the area. These are the Restore initiative. Working together, once the Protect team has identified where are the key corridors to be established, our Restore team work with the stakeholders to really put the restoration on the ground. And on promoting sustainable production of palm oil, we continue to work with various stakeholders while we recognize that we may not be able to only just limit our work with the growers within that area, but we try to focus within that area to support the protection of the whole area. So far, we have managed to have one established business model through a cooperative where we continue to engage growers, smallholders and middle-sized growers, capacity build them and empower them to be able to function as a cooperative, which will help them in the long run to certify and maintain their plantation. By certifying, this also ensures that they are able to adhere to a very strict standard, RSPO and MSPO, very strict sustainability standards that allow them to continue in the long run. So far, we have 30 we are working with 30 smallholders, 175 hectares, and 4 medium-sized growers, 944 hectares, through this cooperative business model. So we also work with beyond this landscape, trying to strengthen sustainable sourcing links with global buyers. So we, through our network, we engage buyers in China, India, and also in Europe to try and make these linkages. And we work with accreditation. We work with RSPO to promote inclusive practices across the palm oil supply chain to ensure that the benefits is shared throughout the supply chain. So that is in a nutshell what we are doing here in Sabah through the living landscape approach at the living landscape. With that, we thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Robecca, for the presentation. We really enjoyed today's presentation and the insights that were shared from this presentation, especially about Sabah. So now with that, we would like to conclude today's program. So thank you to all of you for joining us on the second last day of the Malaysian Support for the COP30 event. We really hope that you enjoyed the sessions and the discussions that have taken place in the last couple of days. Please do stay tuned for our final session tomorrow at the same time, tomorrow, November 21st, 2025, where we'll be exploring the theme of the final day, which is reflections and roadmaps. So the recording of today's session will be available soon. And if you have friends or colleagues who would like to join, registrations are still open. And also, we would like to inform you, so just now on the screen, a poll session survey would have popped up. So before you leave, we would like for you to kindly fill up the poll session survey form. So if it doesn't appear, simply click the poll icon at the top left of your screen. Do stay tuned for the last session tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you.